Hey guys! I can see there's a few of you guys already here, so just send a wave or a hello. Yep, Beck's here. Anybody else? Oh, there's some more people who've joined in. Yep. Oh, fun. Yep, just say, hey, I'm here. Welcome. It's always really odd starting these lives by yourself. And then you watch them back later and you're like, that was really awkward. Or starting by yourself. Oh, hello, Annie. Yep, I can see so many people. This is going to be really fun. So I'm going to just go ahead and jump right in because I'm honestly hungry. I haven't had dinner yet. So I'm sure some of you guys are probably munching on something right now while you're getting ready to sit back and watch the live. I hope you've come with your questions all ready to go. Oh, thank you, Bowerbird. That's so kind of you. So yes, what we're going to be doing today is we are going to be talking about bias binding. And from teaching workshops and teaching people how to sew, I've seen so many times where we get to the end of the class, the Bondi top's completely done or whatever garment you're working on, and then it's the rush to the end to get the bias on. And this is the part you don't want to rush because this is the one that it's on show. Everybody can see it. So I wanted to show you my tips and tricks to getting it to lay as flat as what this looks like. And it's really, really easy. So, oh, you're having pasta. Yum. Sorry, I keep getting distracted with what people are saying they're having. Yeah, so I'm going to show you how to do this bias binding. A really super simple technique. I'm going to first show you how to cut it yourself. So if you wanted to make your own bias binding, and then I'm going to show you how to attach it. So I've done like a little bit of a mock-up, step 1, 2, 3, and 4. So hopefully you can remember it. Obviously, the directions are included in the pattern and we have tutorial videos, and I'm going to save this live as well so that you can go back later and watch it. So maybe have me on play while you're doing it for the first time so that you can, follow along. I always find that when you see it, you read it, and you physically do it, that sometimes it helps when you have to go back and do it yourself. So let's go ahead, jump in. Before we start, do we have any questions? Also, I wanted to let you know we have Beck here. I have her on Zoom just so she can talk to me. So if you have questions, I'm going to have my phone facing down, so I won't be able to see if you make any comments or suggestions, but she'll be able to read your comments and suggestions and read them out to me out loud. So feel free to type them. She might wait until I kind of pause a little bit before she says them out to me, but don't be afraid to ask questions as we go. So if we don't have any questions as we're starting, I'm going to go ahead and flip the camera down and get started. And then I'll flip it back up when we're done, and we can talk a little bit more about the Bondi and stuff like that. So, don't get dizzy. Okay, let's get it turned around. Now, let's turn the camera around. Okay. All right. Can you guys see my table okay? You can see my hands, see the table, see what I'm working with. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right, so the first thing I want to show you is how to make your own bias strips. So the first thing to know is fabric has your straight of grain that goes up and down, and then your crosswise grain that goes left to right from selvage to selvage. So this doesn't stretch, that doesn't really stretch, but on the bias, which is the diagonal, that stretches a lot. See how much movement's in that? So the reason we have to cut strips on the bias is because they're going to be going around a curved neckline. So we want to cut on this bias here so that they move and flex with the shape of our neckline. So what I tend to do is take a little scrap of my fabric and cut it into a rough square like I have here. So you can see it's not a perfect square, but it's just a little rough cutout. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take one corner and then fold it up to the other corner so that we can create this fold here. And this is where the bias is. So the first thing we're going to have to do is cut off the edge of that fold. So when you're using a ruler and when you're cutting your own bias, you do need a mat. So this is just a self-healing mat. You want a big, large ruler. Don't use one like this because I have seen people cut some finger little bits off with using that. So like your hands, you want to be able to put a big spider hand to be able to hold the whole ruler down. And then I just use a normal rotary cutter. This one's a 28 mil. You can also use a 45 mil because you're just cutting a straight line, so it doesn't matter which one you use. So what we're going to do is just ride it right on the edge of the fold and then cut right up to where your fingers are, spider walk up, cut, and then move your ruler up. So you never want to go back with the rotary cutter because that's when you can cut into your fabric, things can move. And also it's really important to have those big spider hands. You can see how I'm holding the rotary cutter with my finger on this little notch here. And the power is coming from the top of my arm, not from my wrist. So move your hands forward and then slide all the way. And you can see if I missed it, I'm going to come back and go forward again. Never go backwards. And if you do, just don't tell me about it. So now what we're going to do is we're going to rotate this around because now we have two triangles, both have that biased edge, and we are going to cut these at 1 3/4. So this is just a number I choose because you could cut them at 1 1/2 and they'd be quite narrow. You could cut them at 2 and they'd be a little wide. So I like to go at 1 3/4, but you can decide how wide or how narrow you want your bias to be. So I've lined it up with my ruler so I can see how far away I am and I can see that I'm straight. Again, spider hand, go. So I can keep cutting bias strips. This is also a really great way to use up your scraps. So if you've made lots of garments and you have some big scrap pieces, it'd be really cool to sit there and make a little bit of bias. You can also make rope bowls and different things with the bias, make piping. So it's worthwhile making a little bit if you ever wanted to. So the next thing that we're going to do is if you wanted to join them, what I like to do is place one facing up towards the sky towards me. So I like to line it up with my body and have it facing up. And then the next one I'm going to put at a right angle going off to my right side. So it might be your left side, but it's my right side. And I'm going to sew from point. So you can see that's the 90-degree angle. I'm going to sew from that corner to that corner. Now I like to put a pin there and then fold it back. And I call this check it before you wreck it. I like to check and make sure that where I'm going to sew is actually going to make continuous bias, because if you choose the wrong corner to corner and you went this way, look, that's not going to create bias. So I like to put that along where I'm going to sew. And if you would like to, you can also use a ruler and a marking pin to mark the line you're going to sew on. Now, my machine's way over there and I don't want to change camera lenses or anything like that. So once you sew onto that, you are going to just clip up, clip over at about, I don't know, 1 centimeter or so, clip down. And then once you're done with that, you're going to just press that open. So you can see that once that was stitched, that would create your continuous bias. And you just press that open and then press this entire thing in half. So a lot of times when you purchase bias, it comes like this. This is your double folded. So technically they call this single folded because it's only been folded once into the middle. And then when you see on the package, it says double folded. That means that they've folded it once into the middle. And then they've also folded it again like this. But we don't want this sort of bias. It doesn't matter if it comes like this because we can press it open. So if you get bias and you have some and it's pressed like this already, what I've done here, I'm just going to move those out of the way. What I've done here is I've pressed the entire thing open and then I've pressed the entire thing in half. So it doesn't matter if it comes pre-pressed like this You just press it open and then press it, fold it, matching the raw edges, and press it in half. That is just for my particular technique. If you are doing this for a quilt, or you were doing this for edging a blanket or something like that, you may want to keep it like this. But for our purposes today, we only want it folded in half, which makes it a lot faster and easier. And that's what I am all about. So now that we know what sort of bias we're going to do, I want to show you how to actually attach it. But before I move on, I just want to check and make sure we don't have any questions about cutting your own bias, because I know that's a lot of information to take in. Did we have any questions about that?
No, nothing so far, but you should put your guard on your rotary cutter.
Yeah, done. Oh, which one? This one? No, that one has it too. Yeah, they both have it. Yeah, okay. So, step number 1 is we want to find the middle of the back of our neck, okay? So I like to put a pin or a mark marking the middle of the back of the neck of our garment. Next, I am going to go about an inch to the left, or you could do a peace sign, doesn't matter, and about an inch to the right. Now what I want you guys to notice is that I did green for go and red for stop. So when I'm teaching this, I always try to use color pins so that you know when to go and when to stop. Next, we're going to take our folded bias. So you can see, there it is. It's nice and folded. I'm going to lay it here at the red, but I'm going to start pinning here at the green. Now, when I do this, I honestly don't put that many pins, because I find as you're sewing, if you allow the fabric to move a little bit as you're going around how it wants to be, then I think you will just find that it goes a lot flatter and it doesn't create those puckers. So you can see about that far apart, go a little bit, place a pin so I can hold it in both my fingers, and then I'm just gently working my way around. Now I'm not pulling this too much because this can stretch and move. So what I like to do, and I'll just show you this really quickly, the minute you cut out your Bondi top, especially if you're working with rayon, linen, double gauze, anything that's a really loose weave. So basically when things are woven, the fibers cross over each other like this. And as you've cut it on the bias, those fibers have nothing holding them together anymore. So they start slipping and moving like this. And that's what's happening to your neckline. So if you've ever cut something out and then had it grow and you're like, wow, that neck is massive, it may be because your neck has stretched and moved out of proportion. So I like to use this stuff. We have a little bit in the shop and it's called Vilene Stay Tape. And I'll bring it close to the camera so you can see. It has a little bit of cotton twill running through it. And then it's like interfacing, just an iron-on interfacing that you iron to the wrong side of the fabric. So literally, the minute you cut out your front and your back, iron a little bit onto that. You could also use a stay stitch. I find a stay stitch sometimes puckers things and depends on the tension of your machine. So I like to just use this on the inside. So hopefully that will help you if you're finding that your necks are growing on you. So anyways, continue all the way around, pinning, pinning, pinning. I'll just put a couple more pins in there. Okay, one more. And then back to my red.
Lindsay.
Yes?
Annie asked if you could stay stitch instead.
Yes, definitely. You can definitely stay stitch instead of using the stay tape. I just find sometimes stay stitching because you're working with that part of the fabric, sometimes it will pucker or gather up a little bit. So it just depends on, making sure that your tension's not too tight, and just be really gentle with it, that you're not pulling it as you're stay stitching around it. But definitely, yes, you can stay stitch it. Great question. All right, so once we have this all pinned around, we're going to start sewing at the green. I like to sew just inside where I can see that folded line. So that's probably about 3/8 of an inch all the way around from start to stop. All right, so now we are on step number 2. So you can see here, I've sewn it. Here it is all sewn. And if you feel like it's a little bit bulky, you can trim it back. So you could just use some scissors and give it a little bit of a trim. But I find, that seam allowance, you shouldn't need to trim that too much. It's just to reduce bulk. So if you're using really thick fabric, you may just want to reduce some of the bulk inside that seam. Then what we're going to do is we are going to, again, put our pin where center is. So this is where we're saying center is going to be. And now we're going to join the 2 biases together. So what I like to do is lay the bias over the top of the pin, open the bias up, and then mark with a marking pen. And I don't know if y'all noticed that I can't say pin and pin correctly. So this is a P-E-N and that's a P-I-N, and that is just the way I say it. So I'm sorry if I'm confusing anyone. So we're just going to mark there and then lay that over the top of that one, open it up, mark the middle. Okay, so once I have both of those lines marked, if you wanted to be extra pedantic and wanted to make sure you had it, I'd even go to the iron and maybe fold that back and fold that one back and press them both really well. So then now it doesn't matter if you can see that line. You can actually see the fold, which is a little bit easier to follow. So we're going to take those 2, put them right sides together, matching that pink line. And when I put the pin through, I should be able to see that it's gone through the pink line on both sides. So if it hasn't, just take it out a little bit. And now I can see pink line, and that's the line I'm going to sew on. So we're going to take that to the machine, sew directly on that line. And then when you're done, you're going to go about 1 centimeter past, give it a cut, and then press it open. Okay, so now we are on to step number 3. See, this is so much better than having to sit there and watch me sew, isn't it? All right, so I've sewn it, I've pressed it. Now I've pressed this back in half, and you're going to go to your machine and finish sewing that little opening there. So you can see there was my start. There was my finish. Now that that's together, now you can sew from here to here, okay? So once you've done that, your final bit, and this is probably the bit that I think people struggle with the most, is rolling the bias to the inside. So what I like to do is I like to have this facing me. So the bias is facing towards me, and I flip it over and I roll with my fingers. And I roll until I can see just the tiniest little bit of the front towards the inside. And then I use one of my pins, and then I pin really close to this inside folded edge. So you can see I'm not ironing, because I feel like when you iron, you're kind of manipulating the fibers to be you're trying to do it before you've sewn anything, so it's like messing things up a little bit. But this way I feel like they retain their flexibility. So just a little bit of roll with the fingers. Can you guys see that okay? Yeah. And then pin right here close to that edge. This is the edge we want to sew at, not this edge. If we sew too close here, your bias is just going to flip up. We're wanting to sew it here. Another thing is we are going to be sewing the bias from this side, from the wrong side. Because I know a lot.
Libby does ask, sorry, Lindsay.
Yeah,
Libby
no worries.
does ask, do you do an understitch?
Yeah, you can certainly, if you wanted to. I've never done an understitch with my bias. I just find that it's a little bit of an extra step that I've never needed. But 100%, you can press this seam allowance up towards the bias and then stitch right here close to the edge. So you're not sewing on the actual garment, you're just sewing the seam allowance to the bias, and then that's going to help it fold and roll over so that you don't have to do so much finger manipulating like what I'm doing. So again, like if you're quite new and you're a bit concerned that it's not going to roll over, press the seam allowance towards the bias and stitch the seam allowance down, and that's called an understitch. So yeah, great question, Libby. You can definitely do that. So we're just going to keep going around, rolling with our fingers. Okay, so you shouldn't, the reason I use contrast is I really like the idea of the inside of my garments being just as fancy and special to me as the outside of my garments. But the other thing is you're not going to see it. Like when you do that technique, you're not going to see any of the bias. So it doesn't matter if it's hot pink on the inside of something else. Like you're not going to be able to see it. It's going to be just specially for you. So it doesn't matter if it matches exactly. I mean, you can make your own bias like what we did earlier. So it does match exactly. But, you know, we can break rules and do what we like. Okay, so now that you have that all pinned, what I suggest using to stitch down hems, to stitch down bias, anything like that, is an edge stitch foot. Now, some machines come with something similar. So a brother machine may come with something that looks a little bit similar to this, but it is an additional foot that you may need to purchase for your machine. So what is special about this foot is that, see how it has a little bit of a guide? If you're ever worried about sewing straight, this foot is going to help you. So if I hem my sleeves, if I hem the bottom of my garment, like on the Bondi top on the back, it says top stitch the yoke. I don't eyeball that with my normal foot. I pop this foot on, and normally your needle's in the center, and I just move my needle over to the right 2 clicks. If you have a machine, your zigzag, when your machine is in a straight stitch, if you hit your zigzag when it's in the straight stitch, it will move to the right and to the left. So having worked with machines, the only ones that don't do it are 30, 40 years old. And some of those even do it. And I know Bernina has a needle position button specifically on it. Your brothers, if they're electronic, when they're in a straight stitch, you should be able to move them to the right and to the left. So I just line the edge of this foot up with the edge of my bias, and then just move my needle over a few clicks, and then I hand walk it down so I can check and make sure. Now what I want to show you is, can you see my stitching? Can you see how extremely close to that edge my stitching is? But what else is important is that it looks just as nice from this side as it does from the front. So you can see it's sewn straight. It looks amazing. And I've sewn all the way around. So I like to start here at the shoulder, at this shoulder seam, do my little back stitch, and then I use that foot and then ride all the way around. So once you have that attached, now it is time to press. And that's where this guy comes into play, and flatter spray. So let me just get my iron set up really quick. Okay. So I've talked about flatter spray on here quite a bit. So hopefully most of you guys know what it is, but for those that don't, it is a lightweight spray starch. And when you've done all this manipulation to to the bias and to the neck and that sort of thing, it may have a little bit of puckering and it may not be looking the way you want it to look when you first put it on. You're like, great, done, whack it on. And you're like, oh, why isn't it sitting right? And why is it falling forward? And why is it looking crap? So what I suggest doing is taking a bit of spray starch and getting that nice and wet, front and back. Okay. Once it's wet, the fibers are going to be able to be manipulated. So once you hit it with the starch and then you hit it with the iron, it's going to dry and it's going to dry into place. So I like to put it over the top of my ham and then give it a nice press. So I'm using a dry iron, and you can see I'm working in circular motion and see how nice and flat that is. So a lot of times too, what you think is a pucker isn't actually a pucker. It's just because it's been all squished up while you're sewing, it looks like it's overlapped. But I promise you, if you give it a little bit of a spray, give it a little bit of a tug, the number of times somebody was nearly in tears because they had a pucker and I just went there and I gave it a little bit of a wiggle and it came right out. It just, yeah, it really saves the day. All right, so we're just going to go around that. Another big tip when using bias is that your bias should be a lighter weight than what your original fabric is. So if you're using a really, really lightweight chiffon-y sort of fabric, don't use a really thick bias. So the reason I use these ones is they are all really lightweight, soft, 100% cotton. So a lot of times if you buy your bias at Spotlight, you can feel that it has a lot of stiffener. It's really, really hard. And those are just going to make your whole bias fall forward. So you can see that is going to lay really nice and flat. And if you feel like it's still falling forward, you can even give it a little bit of a steam press and press it flat. Because essentially what you want it to do is you want it to concave up towards your chest. I've also found that checking it in the washing machine and dryer, once you get it back out after doing that, that all of the fibers that have been moved and manipulated while you've been sewing, they all kind of like go back into place. So you know how you wear jeans and then after a couple days, those jeans get loose and they get worn and the fibers kind of go loose, and then you wash it and dry it and then everything kind of goes back to where you want it to be. That's the same with any fabric. So yeah, if you struggle with that, then I would suggest just throwing in the washing machine and dryer. Next week, we are going to be looking, if you feel like it's more of a fit issue for the neck and the bust rather than actually just sewing the bias. Next week, we're going to take a deep dive into doing the gaping neck adjustment and a full bust adjustment. So that's what we're going to be covering next week. So that is all of my tips on the bias. I just wanted to show you. This one was another one.
So, Lindsay, yeah. I do just have one quick question.
Yeah, of course.
So when you're stitching the bias, just to confirm, the side you stitch is the side you fold under?
Yeah, so where I'm stitching, if that's the edge, and I fold that down, the place I'm stitching is this edge, not this outer edge. I'm not sewing anywhere close to this outside folded edge. I'm sewing from the inside on this inside edge of the bias. Yeah. Did that answer that? Okay.
I think so. Thank you.
Awesome. All right. So I'm going to flip the camera back around because that was about it for my demo. Oh, that's what I was doing. I was showing. I wanted to show you guys that if you also struggled with the curved hem of the Bondi top, the whole idea of bias is to go around curves. So if you have a really tricky curved hem or you wanted to add something that was curved, you can see here that I just added bias along the bottom edge. And so it kind of makes it sit a little bit heavier, but not too heavy, and gives it a really beautiful finish on the inside of your garments as well. So that's another little tip I wanted to show you for working with that sort of bias. So here, I'm just going to flip myself around. All right. Yeah, thank you. My ironing board setup. So I covered that. That's just like an old IKEA, one of those little small ones. And then I've just put batting over it. Apparently, this is what I did not know. Your wadding over time gets thinner and thinner. And so I was pressing and I kept seeing all these like crisscross marks on my fabrics when I was pressing. And I was like, what is happening? And then somebody said, oh, your wadding, it's done. So I took all the wadding out of that old one, bought some new quilt wadding, and then just layered it, and then used the other one as a template and made my own. So yeah, thank you so much. All right. Any other questions that you guys have while you're here? I really appreciate you all joining us for this quick little tutorial and taking time out of your evening to be with us and learning. I just find, there's so much that you can add to a video. Like we can do blogs, we can do posts, but being one-on-one and being able to share this sort of stuff with you live really makes such a difference. So, Beck, did you see any other questions that I needed to answer?
No, I think we've covered everything that's come up so far.
No. Yeah, cool. Well, I have, just before I sign off, I wanted to tell you guys that just for being here tonight and being with me, I have done a little coupon code for you. In the website, it's LIVE10, so LIVE 10, so 10% off whatever things you guys need. So if you need a little bit of flatter spray or a pressing hem or your Bondi top or, basically anything, I thought if you're taking time out of your day and your evening to, that's LIVE10, that's right. Oh, that's you, Beck. I thought that was somebody else. So you're spending time with me. And
with your accent.
Yeah, that's right. The accent, you guys have no clue what I'm saying. I just wanted you guys to say thank you, or for me to say thank you for spending time with me tonight. So anyways, I am going to go eating. We have a question. Are you wearing a Bondi top with extended sleeves? Why, yes, I am. This is the Bondi top extension pack. So it has the sleeve with the band. Also has the little tie at the waist. You don't have to do that. Has the pockets and lengthened into a dress. So yeah, once you've made your Bondi top and you got it fitting the way you want it, then you can use the expansion pack to add on the sleeves and do all the other things to it. So it's really cool. So you guys should grab that too with your LIVE10 discount. Yeah, thank you guys. Thank you so much for being here. We'll be getting that. Oh yeah, cool. All right, I'm gonna sign off, go have dinner, and we'll see you guys next Tuesday. Bye guys.